Hello, and welcome back to English Sound Building, the advanced pronunciation podcast where you do the work to build muscle memory, and master new sounds. Always remember that successful communication is possible in any one of the thousands of global English accents. This podcast is for those of you who enjoy playing with sound. We're here to have fun. If you'd find it useful to read as you listen, remember that you can now find a free script for this podcast on my Patreon page. That's www.patreon.com/EnglishBrickByBrick. The link's in the episode notes. This week, we're continuing from last week's look at t and d to talk about past tense ed endings. You may have noticed last week that some of the words we focused on had ed endings. These are so common in English. In fact, there were two in the first part of this sentence, noticed and focused. I've chosen this one not only because they're so common, but also because the pronunciation of these ed endings is something even my very advanced learners still have questions about. There are two main things to think about. First, the pronunciation of the letter E in these endings, and second, the pronunciation of the letter D. Of course, to do this, we're also going to need to know how to make the t and d sounds. Please go back and review last week's episode if you need to. If you didn't manage to catch last week's episode, at least consider with which part of your tongue and where exactly on or behind the back of your upper front teeth you would naturally make these sounds. In English, the sounds are made with the blade of the tongue, that's the flat part behind the tip, on the alveolar ridge, and that's the hard, gummy bit just behind the upper front teeth. T, 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 d, 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 t, 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 d, d, d. Let's start by thinking about the two main ways in which past tense ed endings are pronounced. The first way is to pronounce that letter E, making the ed letters into their own syllable. In other words, adding an extra syllable to the base form of the verb. The letter E most commonly comes out as an I sound, but may also be closer to a schwa. Listen to and repeat these examples. I'll read the base form of the verb first, followed by the past tense with the ed ending. And you should notice that that past tense form has an extra syllable compared with the base form. Start, started. End, ended. Hate, hated. Need, needed. So, can you remember from your English classes, or guess from the examples, when we pronounce that letter E and add the extra syllable? That's right. The great news is that this is a place where English has a clear rule and follows it. If the base form of the verb itself ends with a t or d sound, not letter, then we pronounce that E and add that extra syllable. If we didn't, we'd either have to make two t or d sounds in a row, which sounds really weird and is almost impossible, start t and d, or we'd be unable to mark that past tense at all. It's worth noting that we often see these ed endings in adjectives too. Here there are a few exceptions to this pronunciation rule and a few places where that extra syllable will be added even if not after a t or d sound, for example in naked and wicked. Coming back to past tense ed endings, in all other regular verbs, that is, all those which don't end with a t or d sound, we don't pronounce that letter E. This also means that we don't add a syllable to the base form of the verb when making the past tense form. The past tense ed ending is simply marked by the pronunciation of the final letter D on the ed ending. Listen to and repeat these examples, noticing that the base form has the same number of syllables as the past tense ed form. Watch, watched. Notice, noticed. Close, closed. Love, loved. How did you do? The instinct to pronounce that letter E and create an additional syllable here can be really strong, perhaps particularly if your language doesn't have consonant clusters. So many of my learners would pronounce the above watched, noticed, closed, loved. But because this both adds a syllable and a vowel sound, it can be quite misleading for the listener. The other thing to be conscious of here is how that letter D is pronounced. Listen again. Watched, noticed, closed, loved. Did you notice that the first two were pronounced t, watched, noticed, and the second two d, closed, loved? Do you know why? Theoretically, this letter D should naturally come out as a voiceless t sound if the preceding consonant sound is itself voiceless, and as a voiced sound if the preceding consonant is voiced. This does happen naturally most of the time, and even if it doesn't, it's unlikely to lead to any miscommunication. So usually when I'm teaching, I advise learners not to worry about getting this distinction right because your mouth will do it for you. However, if you're working at a really high level, if you really want to push your pronunciation to a more English from England like model, and if your language is one of those we spoke about last week, which has a tendency to devoice final consonants or consonant clusters, just be aware of this. Some of my learners, for example, would say closed, voiceless, as opposed to closed, voiced, for example. Have a play today with voicing these and see how it feels. Okay, let's look at some more examples of all of those three possibilities. First, verbs ending in t or d. So here we're going to pronounce that letter E in the ed ending as well as the letter D and end up with an additional syllable, like in started and ended. I'll read the base form. Can you repeat and also give the ed ending? You'll notice I've thrown some higher level verbs in this week. We'll do the first one together as an example. Accept. So you should have repeated accept, accepted. Let's do the rest. Add, allocate, communicate, compensate, complement, contract, differentiate, expand, extend, facilitate, head, implement, include, integrate, interest, land, motivate, proceed, respond. Well done. Now listen to both forms, repeat, and see how you did. Accept, accepted. Add, added. Allocate, allocated. Communicate, communicated. Compensate, compensated. Complement, complemented. Contract, contracted. Differentiate, differentiated. Expand, expanded. Extend, extended. Facilitate, facilitated. Head, headed. Implement, implemented. Include, included. Integrate, integrated. Interest, interested. Land, landed. Motivate, motivated. Proceed, proceeded. Respond, responded. Fantastic. Now we'll do some past tense endings with the t sound. So here we're not adding in an extra syllable, but we have a voiceless sound at the end of the base form, which leads our past tense ending to also have that t form. Again, I've mixed in some higher level verbs here. I'll read the base form. Can you repeat and also give the ed ending? And again, we'll do the first one as an example. Approach. So you should have read approach, approached. Notice there is no extra syllable there. Let's try the rest. Develop. Diminish. Enforce. Face. Focus. Help. Increase. Link. Produce. Publish. Purchase. Reach. Reduce. Reverse. Stop. Talk. Thank. Walk. Work. Okay, now listen to both forms, repeat and see how you did. Approach, approached. Develop, developed. Diminish, diminished. Enforce, enforced. Face, faced. Focus, focused. Help, helped. Increase, increased. Link, linked. Produce, produced. Publish, published. Purchase, purchased. Reach, reached. Reduce, reduced. Reverse, reversed. Stop, stopped. Talk, talked. Thank, thanked. Walk, walked. Work, worked. Brilliant. And now some which end in the d sound. So again, we're not adding an extra syllable here, but the base form of the verb ends in a voiced sound, which leads us to make the d sound at the end of the past tense. Again, I'll read the base form. Can you give the ed ending? And we'll do the first one together as an example. Achieve. So you should have read achieve, achieved. Let's try the rest. Allow. Analyze. Believe. Change. Channel. Confirm. Define. Emerge. Emphasize. Explain. Intervene. Modify. Open. Pull. Raise. Remain. Return. Seem. Wonder. Great. Now listen to both forms, repeat and see how you did. Achieve, achieved. Allow, allowed. Analyze, analyzed. Believe, believed. change, changed, channel, channeled, confirm, confirmed, define, defined, emerge, emerged, emphasize, emphasized, explain, explained, intervene, intervened, modify, modified, open, opened, pull, pulled, raise, raised, remain, remained, return, returned, seem, seemed, wonder, wondered. Well done. And you will have noticed there at the end of the word, you do get some devoicing of that D as I switch my vocal cords off because the word is followed by silence. But it's important, as we discussed last week, that at the beginning of that D sound, at the end of those words, that it is voiced. We'll finish with some sentences practicing a mixture of these sounds. To help me to build the sentences more concisely, I have sometimes used the adjective ed endings in here as well. As usual, I'll read each sentence 3 times, the first time slowly to allow you to grasp the words, the second time at a more natural pace. I'll then pause for you to repeat that sentence and read it again at a more natural pace before pausing again for you to repeat the same sentence again. Remember that it's normal to hear some other changes to the sounds in the sentence as I read it at a more natural pace as a result of connected speech, which we'll speak about more in future weeks. There are 4 sentences today. Sentence 1. When approached, the client analyzed the papers and accepted the deal. When approached, the client analyzed the papers and accepted the deal. When approached, the client analyzed the papers and accepted the deal. Sentence 2. I'm interested in whether, when we're complimented, we become more motivated. I'm interested in whether, when we're complimented, we become more motivated. I'm interested in whether, when we're complimented, we become more motivated. Sentence 3. He published some work which confirmed that we'd changed what we believed. He published some work which confirmed that we'd changed what we believed. He published some work which confirmed that we'd changed what we believed. Sentence 4. We explained that we'd modified the structures. This increased production and reduced waste. We explained that we'd modified the structures. This increased production and reduced waste. We explained that we'd modified the structures. This increased production and reduced waste. Well done. That's the end of this time's workout. Practice it as often as you can to build muscle and muscle memory, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This podcast is brand new, and if you liked it, it would really help me if you'd rate and review to help others find me. If you'd like a script of this podcast, a couple of bonus tongue twisters, or to check out more free English, please head over to my Patreon at www.patreon.com/EnglishBrickByBrick. The link's in the episode notes. If you use social media, come and follow me there. I'm based on Instagram at English Brick by Brick, and my feed is shared to Facebook. Again, the page is English Brick by Brick, and Twitter at ing brick by brick. Thanks for listening. Enjoy sound building, and I'll see you soon.